Welcome back to Intentional Money Moves Live. We are experiencing some technical difficulties again, so I'm recording this and I'm going to upload it. But this is part two of our Intentional Money Reset. And if you missed part one, don't worry, because this actually completely stands on its own. But if you do want to go back and watch part one, we will include a link to that recording so you can absolutely catch up there. So this is part two of our three-part series of the intentional mid-year reset. Last week in the first part, we did the really hard work of getting honest. We took a very clear-eyed look at where our money actually is right now, and we reconnected to our values. It's really that compass that tells us whether our money is actually working for the lives that we want, right? And if you did that work, you may have walked away with a gap, a space between kind of where your money has been going and where you actually want it to go. And today we're going to kind of look at the question that is underneath that gap. Okay. Remember, we're not looking at it with judgment. We just want to bring awareness. What's really been stopping you from being in that aligned space where you want to be, right? Because knowing what to do and actually doing it, I'm sure you guys know this, two very different things, right? And the space between those, that's really what we're talking about today. So, just like last week, there's that free workbook. It continues through the whole series. If you haven't gotten a copy of your workbook yet, you can comment on this video reset. We'll make sure you get a link to that workbook. You also, if you don't have a workbook, you can just grab a piece of paper and write it down on a notebook or something as well, or just on your laptop. But if you do want a copy of the workbook, be sure to comment reset and we'll come back and make sure you get a copy of the workbook. So let's talk about the first thing that has been stopping you. And honestly, it's probably not what you think. I hear lots of people talking about the economy, and I certainly talk about what's going on in the economy. People talk about their income. But the third pillar of the intentional money method is mindset. And that's really what I want to talk about today. And here's what I mean. Every single one of us is carrying around a set of stories about money. And those stories might be about whether we're good with it, whether we deserve it, whether it's even possible for somebody like us to feel secure, right? And most of the time, we don't even know the stories are there. They just kind of run quietly in the background. They do shape every single decision that we make. And I want to be really clear about something because this is important. The stories that you're carrying, those are not character flaws, right? We didn't necessarily choose them. Most of them were handed to you a long time ago, right? By maybe how you grew up or what you watched the adults in your lives doing around you with money, things that people said to you, maybe when you were younger. You absorb all of that. So now, as an adult, for a lot of us, those stories are still in the driver's seat. So today, we want to really bring those stories to the light because here's the truth. You can't change a story you haven't named. So as long as it stays in the background, it's going to be running you, right? And the moment that you say it out loud, you get to decide whether or not it's still true. So grab your workbook. Again, comment reset if you still need a workbook or just a piece of paper. But we're going to start to walk through some of these exercises. So here's the question that I want to ask you. And I want you to answer honestly, just for yourself, okay? What is the money story you've been telling yourself most often this year, right? It might sound something like, I'm just not good with money, or it's too late for me, or I'll figure it out later, right? There's never going to be enough. Whatever yours is, I want you to write it down in your own words, okay? Now, I really want you to take your time with this because this can really bring up a lot of stuff for people. And if you're willing, would love for you to share with me. I promise you, when you share these kinds of things, when you share these stories, one of the biggest and most powerful things most people find is they're not alone. And so when we name these things, we allow other people to say, hey, that's me too. And that can be really, really powerful and validating. So I'll show you what this looks like in real life. I was working with a client. I shared a little bit about her last week. We'll call her Sarah for this. 48 years old, and she wanted to stop avoiding her money. And when she did the mindset work, here's the story that she found that was running beneath absolutely everything. And it was that I'm just not a numbers person. I've never been a numbers person. And she had actually been telling herself this story since she had a hard time in math class when she was in elementary school. Okay. And when she traced it back to this particular math class, she actually realized something. This wasn't her story. It was something that a teacher had said to her. She's like 10 years old, and she'd been carrying this story around with her for like 40 years at this point, right? And honestly, it was never true. It just was an old story. So when Sarah and I were working together, we rewrote it. And I want to read directly what her reframe was, because I think this might help some of you. Okay. So here's what she wrote. I am a capable woman who is learning to understand my money one step at a time. All right, I'm going to read that one more time. I am a capable woman who is learning to understand my money one step at a time. Okay. What you can see is that she's clearly still being very honest, but now there's a door open where it used to just feel like a wall, right? Just shut down. Remember, these stories, we're repeating them for years, decades in this case, right? They can start to feel like facts, but they are still just stories, and stories can be rewritten. So we got to remember that, right? So here's the next piece. I want you to ask yourself, whatever your story is, where did it come from? And is it actually yours or did somebody hand it to you? Okay. I think about often, I write a lot for the work that I do. I know I do a lot of work in numbers, but I do write a tremendous amount of content and preparing scripts and emails and just I write a lot. I published a book this past year and I had a high school English teacher who told me that I was not a good writer. I remember him very well. He really hurt my feelings when he said this. And I remember I had a college professor who was struggling with me with my writing. And he's like, I don't understand. Like, why is it that you think you're such a bad writer? And I shared with him what my experience had been. And he was like, but that's just not true. But I tell you that because even though I had this wonderful college professor who tried to help me kind of reframe what my experience had been in high school, it's still a message that comes up for me, even all these years later, even with all the professional writing that I do. It still comes up, right? So we have to really pay attention to whether or not the beliefs that we're carrying are even ours to begin with, right? Because a lot of times they actually belong to a parent, maybe a partner, even like an experience like I had, which was decades ago, right? And then the question that starts to really set you free, what would you believe about money and about your future if that story wasn't true? Okay. What would you believe about money and about your future if that story wasn't true? Just imagine for a second. Who would you be with your money if that old story just didn't get a vote anymore? Right. And it's not about pretending. I'm not asking you to just slap a positive sticker over a real fear. I'm asking you to take that old story and to really look at it and how can you rewrite it into something that is both honest but also open to possibility, right? So instead of I'm just not good with money, maybe it becomes I'm someone who is learning to understand my money and I'm already further than I was last week, right? Still honest, leaving the door open. And there's space that you'll see in the workbook for this. Again, if you need the workbook, just comment reset and we'll get you a copy of the workbook. All right, so I want you to take the story that has been stopping you, and I want you to write sort of that truer, more open version right next to it. And I want to be clear about something. You do not have to fully believe it yet. You don't have to fully believe it yet. You just have to be willing to kind of try it on for size, see how it fits, okay? So we talked about mindset and we talked about some of this inside work. Now we want to balance that with some of the outside work because here's the truth, right? Mindset without strategy is just kind of wishful thinking. And strategy without mindset is a plan that you're not actually going to follow, right? So we want both. That's why the fourth pillar is strategy. Now, you've kind of started to shift those stories. Now let's get practical and honest about where are the actual strategic gaps in your plan, right? And this is not to overwhelm you. I want to be very clear about that. We just want to put a spotlight on one or two places where a little focused attention could make a real difference for you. Okay. So in your workbook, this is called the strategy gap assessment. And it's just a simple list, and you're going to rate yourself from 1 to 5 on each of these areas. Okay. 1 is going to be an area that needs real attention, and 5 means you really already feel very solid there. And this is for you. This is not a report card, okay? This is literally like it looks a little a little bit like a report card, but it is not. This is about finding the gaps, right? Building awareness is not about judgment. We always need to remind ourselves of that, right? All right, the first one, I have a clear budget or spending plan that I actually follow. So 1 to 5. 1 is if you're feeling very weak, 5 is if you're feeling very solid in this area. So the first one is I have a clear budget or spending plan that I actually follow. And the second one, I have an emergency fund that could cover 3 to 6 months of expenses. I have an emergency fund that covers 3 to 6 months of expenses. And then the third, I'm contributing to my retirement savings consistently. I am contributing to my retirement savings consistently. Now, of course, if you're already retired, you may just give yourself a 5 if you're in like the drawdown period and you're not still actively contributing. Similarly, 4 is about debt. If you don't have debt, good for you. You can give yourself a 5, but this is I have a real plan for paying down any debt. And so again, 1 is going to be if you feel this is an area of weakness, 5 if it's really a non-issue for you. Number 5, I understand my investments and I feel confident about my approach. I understand my investments and feel confident about my approach. And last but certainly not least, I have a financial plan for a major goal in the next 1 to 3 years. I have a financial plan for a major goal in the next 1 to 3 years. And I want you to just take a look at kind of the numbers you gave yourself. Don't panic if you see some 1s and 2s. Again, this is not about failure. This is not about judgment. It's a map, right? Those low numbers are literally showing you where your energy will pay off the most in the second half of the year. So here's your reflection. Which area scored the lowest and what has actually been getting in the way of addressing it? And notice if a mindset story shows up here because they are very connected. And sometimes, like the reason the emergency fund never gets built, it's not the money, it's the story that says it'll never be enough anyway, so why bother, right? And that's exactly why we talked about the mindset work first, right? The story and the strategy, they're always talking to one another. And when you shift the story, a lot of times that strategy that may have felt impossible in the past begins to feel possible. Okay. And here's where it really gets good. I don't want you to try to fix all 6 of these. Okay. That is a recipe for overwhelm. And overwhelm, quite frankly, that's where good intentions go to die. All right. So instead, I want you to pick one, just one, and ask yourself, what is the single strategic change I could make in the next 30 days that's going to have the biggest positive impact on my financial picture? And I want you to make it specific. So not like, oh, I just want to save more money, right? That's a wish. That's not a plan, okay? Instead, it's I'm going to set up an automatic transfer of $100 to my savings on the first of every month, right? See how concrete that is? Specific is what actually is going to happen, right? Vague is where we kind of stay in that, like, oh, someday we'll get there, right? So let's go back to our example of Sarah, who I shared about before. When she did the strategy gap assessment, she found that her lowest score was in the emergency fund area. She just really didn't have hardly anything set aside. But here is the beautiful part, okay? She realized that the reason was not actually the money, it was an old story. And that old story was why build a cushion if I'm just bad at this anyway, right? The story and the gap, they were connected the whole time. So with her new reframe in place, she picked one strategic move, not to fix everything, right? We focus on one thing. And she set up an automatic transfer, $250 a month going into her individual savings account on the 1st and the 15th of the month, right? And it was set up so it would coincide with her pay schedule. It was specific. She was automating it. It was very doable. And just like that, just making that shift, the gap that had felt impossible for years finally started to close because she finally changed the story that was kind of like protecting that, right? Now, that little shift from this overwhelming to kind of like, oh, okay, I can do that one thing. That's the entire thing. That's it, right? That feeling is momentum. That momentum is really what carries you through the second half of the year. So, before I kind of wrap things up here, let's tie it all together, right? Today, you did two really important things. You brought your money stories into the light and you started to really reframe them, to rewrite them, right? And then you also found one strategic move that's going to matter more over the next 30 days, right? That's going to be like the most important thing. That's how we get the mindset and the strategy really working together. And in your workbook, again, if you need a copy of the workbook, just comment reset. We'll make sure you get your copy of the workbook. It's free. But in your workbook, there is a place where you can capture your intention for today. And it goes like, in the second half of this year, I'm committed to shifting my mindset around, and then you're going to fill in the blank and taking this one strategic action. Okay. Take a minute to fill those blanks in. And again, if you don't have the workbook, write it down, put it somewhere, acknowledge it, right? That's kind of your reset. If we focus on that one thing, we're going to start to see some real shifts and changes for you. And that's so empowering, right? That momentum is just everything. All right. So here's what's coming next. This was part 2 of our intentional mid-year reset. Now, next week, Tuesday, June 30th, is going to be our final session. And I think because I have been having some trouble with the live streaming on Substack for some reason, I think I'm just going to go ahead and host that one on Zoom. So we'll get a link out to people who want to attend that live so you can have that opportunity for interaction. But part 3 is your second half starts now. And that's really the big one, right? We're going to take everything, clarity, your values, the mindset work we did today, your strategy. We're going to start looking at how do you turn that into a plan for the balance of the year. And I have something very special planned for that particular episode. So, and I've been working on it for a while. So I hope that you will join me live. Again, that's going to be Tuesday, June 30th at noon Eastern time. I'm going to do a Zoom link for that one. So that way I make sure that we don't have any more technical troubles. Um, I want to just be very frank with you because it's something that I see all the time. So many of you are doing this work alone, right? You're showing up, you're being brave, you're carrying it all by yourself. And here's what I know after years, decades of doing this, the women who actually sustain these changes are the ones who don't do it alone, right? They have support, they have accountability, they have other women in it with them, right? And in all honesty, it's the whole reason that I created the Empowered Sisterhood community, right? It is a community where women do this kind of like intentional money work together every week with real support and real accountability. And so, to get the benefit of just being in community and being in space together, I do hope you'll join us next week live on the Zoom session. We'll send out that link. But today, your only homework is this. I want you to just go back to that part 2 intention and get clear on, what is your intention and that strategic action that you're going to take. And don't wait. Don't wait on this because you can really start to build momentum very quickly. But the most important thing is to get started, right? So I am so grateful for those of you who took the time to watch today and who are doing the work, looking at the stories that you're carrying, rewriting them. That takes courage. And you're doing it. And That's what intentionality looks like, right? So I will see you next week, Tuesday, June 30th at noon for the third part in our series. Bring your workbook and feel free to invite a friend. They can always watch these recordings, but next week's session will also stand alone. So there's no need to play catch up or anything like that. So until then, take good care of yourself.